Welcome to our video and webinar today on Lights Out Planning. It's exciting to see so many large companies join this webinar to understand how new technologies can improve planning. My name is Laura Ciceri, and I'm going to be moderating this session today. And it's really focused on the evolution of planning so that we can drive an autonomous supply chain that drives better decisions. Koen Jaspers, who is the founder of BlueCrux, is going to be going through the outline of the solution, and he'll be joined by Valerie. So Koen, if you'd like to take it over now and actually tell the group a little bit about yourself.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Koen Jaspers. I'm one of the founding partners of BlueCrux. I'm joined here together with Valerie, who is our product manager for our Lights Out Planning solution. As a company, we're a company of about 70 people, and we help our customers in improving their supply chain performance. We are in, let's say, different supply chain elements, going from planning over distribution, customer management, operations, but also elements like workforce and more transformation and digital. On a personal note, I've been in supply chain operations all my life, typically within advisory roles, starting with the larger consultancy firms, and then founding in 2011 together with my co-founders BlueCrux to focus even more on supply chain operations realization. Also within the company, let's say, evolving into a role from a pure advisory role to also creating technology ourselves. So within the company, we have decided around 2 to 3 years ago that we're also going to build our own technology and invest in cloud solutions to help our customers even better in those areas where we believe that today's technology landscape is not providing yet satisfactory solutions to them. Always in a co-creation mode and with a clear focus on where data and digitalization can help to provide better planning decisions. And that's also what resulted in Lights Out Planning, our technology platform to enable better planning decisions based on big data and advanced algorithms, and where Valerie is our product manager, our internal, I would say, lead for the technology solution.
And today Valerie is going to give us a demo of this, which people are quite excited about. Valerie, can you give a little background about yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Valerie van den Broeke. Indeed, I'm a product manager for Lights Out Planning, which means in fact that I myself and a team, we translate the vision we have into real capabilities within the platform. And also together with the customers, I help identifying and defining how they can take a step towards more digital supply chain planning.
Koen, you're located in Europe, but you're working with a lot of large multinationals. Can you talk a little bit about how that organizational design works?
Yeah, sure. So indeed, we are European based. We are located in the center of Europe, but our customers are typically large multinationals that currently already have a planning technology landscape, but are not really satisfied with what that landscape is currently providing them, and to see if that is actually future-proof for what their challenges in the next 5 to 10 years. So actually our services are quite international. So we help our customers abroad, not only in Europe, but also in Asia Pacific, in the US, and even in Latin America.
Oh, Koen, the average company has 7 advanced planning systems, and most are not very satisfied with their planning systems. They take a lot of labor, and people feel that the data is not timely enough, that they can't do the modeling of the operations that they need to have. So why don't we talk a little bit about the system that you've built, and I'm going to moderate the questions. So if people can put their questions in the question box, I will come in and I'll ask Koen and Valerie questions, and we'll moderate a panel after Koen goes through. So Koen, you want to go through the story?
Yeah, sure. So perhaps to give you an idea indeed, so throughout the next coming slides and throughout the next 50 to 55 minutes, we'll be talking more about Lights Out Planning and how we enable our customers indeed to drive better planning decisions. typically, before diving into the content, so the customers that trust us or that work with us are indeed, like you say, larger companies that already have a certain planning landscape in place, that are looking for, that are just actually being confronted with new challenges, and they see an increasing need for optimized supply chain decisions. So a lot of our customers actually are having a global production network. They are faced with increasing more and more demand volatility. They have multi-level product structures. They know that they need to work on customer centricity. They need to improve productivity. And actually, each and every of our customers is looking for new types of solutions, new types of ideas where traditional planning systems are not. They're doing what they need to do, but they're not giving an answer to all these new challenges and these new optimization needs. So they're looking for solutions that help them to move more towards one version of the truth that gives them visibility across the supply chain, where based upon data, they are looking across the entire network on what the current status is, but also what the future status of their supply chain could be in due time. They are having a clear need for better decision making, for more skilled planners that are enabled by new technologies, and a lot of value to come from big data, machine learning, and so on. So basically, what we see with our customers is that there is a clear conscious realization that we're not in the 80s anymore, right? So meaning that when supply chain as a discipline evolved from the 80s and the 90s, it was very linearly defined. I think we all grew up with these mantras of APICS with like downstream and upstream, and plan, source, make, deliver, and all these I would say frameworks that were coming from that era all helped us at due time to structure our new supply chain discipline. But when we move into the supply chain of the future, we don't believe anymore in a sequential supply chain where information is passed on very linearly from the customer over the distribution to the operations towards the supplier of the supplier. We believe more and more in a circular, holistic supply chain where actually digitalization and the availability of data is going to break this kind of functional thinking. We also don't believe anymore in, for example, planning data or distribution data or operations manufacturing data or financial data. We believe in company data, and we believe that this whole new evolution towards data availability and digitalization as an enabler there to actually grasp the value of that data is going to bring us to a new way of looking at supply chain where use cases are being fed from the same company data but across multiple disciplines. And actually, if you would even go one step further, we even don't believe that the supply chain of tomorrow is circular within one company, but even circular across companies. When we're moving also towards more value chain thinking across companies, and then you come obviously into all these kind of elements such as the network of networks. Now, that being said, we truly believe, and that's our vision, that's why we started Lights Out Planning 2 years ago, we believe that the true enabler there is data, data, and data. The fact that we are able now technology-wise to store and link multiple types of data in a very efficient way, that enables us to create new insights that previously were not really realizable. I think from a supply chain perspective, we've always looked at structured data, being it ERP data coming from SAP or Oracle JD Edwards or whatever other system. We look at planning data coming from APO or from OMP or Kinaxis or JDA, which is all similar data in terms of structure and content. But now, in this whole new element of data storage and data analysis, we're also able to look at totally different types of data. Data coming from sensors, data coming from the market, data coming from climate, data coming from point of sales. And it's by linking all these kind of elements of data that we can truly generate new insights and new value. And that's what we try to do with Lights Out Planning. And that being said, we also believe that the supply chain of tomorrow is driving more and more and step by step towards an autonomous supply chain. And of course, this will not be a, let's say, evolution that is going to be done on one day or 1 month or even 1 year, but slowly but surely, this is the evolution that we're seeing into the market that we're also trying to help our customers build towards. It's a little bit similar to, let's say, the evolution towards a self-driving car, where I think over the years, we've always been trying to improve the way we drive our cars, right? We've been trying to implement automatic gear, we're trying to implement GPS, lane control, distance control. But now we're actually really moving towards autonomous driving, which creates a whole new way of looking in towards moving ourselves from point A to point B. It enables us to reallocate time, which is low value adding, meaning driving a car, towards more value adding activities like reading or working. It enables us to do optimized grid utilization. It enables us to anticipate on a better way future traffic, but it also reduces the need for driving skills. And this kind of analogy, you can also look into what is happening with supply chain advanced planning technology. Because I think today a lot of supply chain professionals are still looking at technology in a way that we are trying to capture the intelligence of the human brain into the system by configuring APO or by configuring OMP and by configuring our other technology systems in the way that we have the design in our mind, and we then hope that the system is going to do what we believe it should do. But there is a whole evolution where also, due to new advanced analytics and new advanced algorithms, technology is actually coming up with new ideas, with new propositions that is going to feed us into better decision making. And I think over the last 2-3 years that we've been working on Lights Out Planning, we already had a couple of what we call in Europe aha-erlebnissen, aha moments, where it was not just the result of our own brain that was translated into the technology, but the technology, by combining new sources of data, providing us new insights that we haven't seen within our framework before. And we have a couple of examples of that also in a later use case, which we will discuss today during the webinar. And our ultimate goal actually with the whole Lights Out Planning part is obviously to help companies to move from traditional planning to smart planning, where also the people aspect, so planners, can have a new role which is focused more on value creation and less on keeping the lights on. I think unfortunately, if you would interview planners across the globe, 80% of a planner's day-to-day job is related towards making sure that demand gets propagated throughout the supply chain, that different files are being reconciliated, that master data issues are being resolved, that miscommunications between different functions are being aligned, and limitedly on true value creation. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to fill the white spaces of typical planning systems with our Lights Out Planning capabilities to ensure that these elements of day-to-day activities are being as much as possible supported by the technology, so that planners can do what they're actually best in doing. And that's to create business value from innovative thinking about how planning can help the company moving forward. So that's why actually 2-3 years ago we decided as an original consulting company to invest in technology and to co-create with some of our best customers into a technology platform that was step by step and use case by use case trying to fulfill this vision. This vision that actually, if you want to say, okay, what does that mean? It means actually that we're trying to help customers to move towards a new technology landscape. And on this picture, you see more or less what we believe a future technology landscape could be for some of our customers. At the lower end, you see the physical supply chain, right? A typical end-to-end supply chain going from a supplier over raw material factory over a finished goods factory, 1 or 2, depending a little bit on the industry, towards a downstream distribution networks residing from regional hubs to local DCs to final customer locations. Now, over the last 10, 15 years, most of the companies have been very much focused on building that layer of system of records, ERP implementations of MES, WMS, TMS, to actually organize that physical supply chain and make sure that that physical supply chain runs on an everyday basis, being it on SAP or on JDE or whatever other system. An MES solution like OZPI, a WMS like a Red Prairies, it's independent of the technology. Now, over the last years, we've also been helping a lot of companies in building advanced planning capabilities, advanced planning systems within the supply chain that can be, here we mentioned OMP, but it can also be APO, it can be Kinaxis, it can be JDA, planning systems that across those different ERP systems are going to help to make the plan end-to-end. In supply chain, but also even in other functional areas like quality, where Smart QC, for example, is a solution used often within the QC environment to plan the quality work, so the work around the physical supply chain, I would say. But what we've seen is that actually now a lot of the new business needs are not always met by that advanced planning system layer. And we're helping actually these customers to move towards augmented planning technology, where we, based on the data that these companies more and more are storing and residing in enterprise data grids or data lakes, or depending on data warehouses, doesn't really matter how you want to call it. We're trying to help them to fill the white spaces of that advanced planning system layer to generate more business value and to enable them to create better business decisions. And I think Valerie also in the next session will dive a little bit into what these white spaces are and what kind of capabilities we're helping customers to build, but typically it resides around 5 elements. The first element is the element of the virtual twin. We have seen that by building multiple systems of record, by looking into different planning systems, but also using different systems across different functions like supply chain, quality, etc., companies are now building enterprise data grids to store the data, but still lack capabilities to create a true digital twin, a true digital version of their end-to-end network space. And that's what we try to do. We try to visualize that enterprise data in a way that resembles the end-to-end supply chain in a digital way. And not just in a one-off way, but in a dynamic way, meaning that constantly we sync with a centralized data grid, but it can also be with each of the systems of record itself, to constantly give the latest view of the end-to-end supply chain to the planner, to the user. So he or she at any moment in time has access to a virtual copy of how the real world is now residing within the supply chain. And once we have that, then we can also start augmenting that virtual twin, that digital version, with other capabilities that empower the planner to make better planning decisions. And the first one is smart parameters. Today, a lot of the planning systems are using very static planning parameters. We're talking about, for example, capacities, lead times, scrap, can be demand variability. Typically today, these are parameters that drive the planning, the plan of the planner, but that are either outdated, they're somewhere stored in a system of record like SAP or in an advanced planning system like OMP or APO, but they're not truly looked at in a continuous way and they're not truly smart. So what we try to do is we try to help these companies to using the data grid to make these parameters smart, forward-looking, and in that way optimized. So for example, think about the capacity of a certain line based upon the historical data, but also influencing factors. We try to predict what the capacity is in the future and in a time-phased way, push that back to a planning system so that it creates a better plan. The same in terms of end-to-end visibility. We enable planners to get better visibility over their end-to-end supply chain by representing that data, but also by intervening when certain events arise. We're looking at end-to-end financials because we combine financial data with pure supply chain data to make EBITDA optimization and not pure financial representation of the volume optimization. And we implement control tower concepts to give planners a better grip on the overall view that they need to look at in a day-to-day business. So these are capabilities that we, from our customers' feedback, typically see not being met by the current technology landscape, combination of systems of record and advanced planning systems, and what we try to augment, put on top to enable a better forward-looking decision-making process. That being said, let's make a quick bridge to what we're now actually talking about, right? So perhaps Valerie, if you could share with the audience what we're now talking about in lights out planning in terms of capabilities and technology.
Yes, okay. So indeed, the next question is in fact about how do we translate now this vision into practice, and how can we take a jump towards more digital supply chain together? So, well, in fact, we are building a platform called Lights Out Planning, or LPs, that enable our customers to take that jump. It is in fact a platform which is based on all kinds of new technologies. So here we are not talking about SAP or about GDA or something like that. No, in fact, we are talking about R, Spark, Scala, and so on. Okay, so within the Lights Out Planning platform, in fact, we have 5 core capabilities. So first, indeed, we create a virtual twin, which is a digital representation of your physical network. And then we link this virtual twin back to your data sources. So we keep, in fact, the virtual twin continuously in sync with the physical world. In this way, it enables our customers to create second end-to-end visibility over the end-to-end network. Third, you can set smart parameters and you can feed your system of records with these more smart parameters. Then, as a fourth capability, in fact, we have the end-to-end financials, which enable you to make simulations over the network. And then last but not least, of course, we have the control tower, which creates an overview for the customer, for our customers, and for example, which can give proactive alerts on things that are happening over the network. Okay, here on the next slide, you can see how this now relates to the planning systems you probably have already in place. Well, first, very important, the goal of Lights Out Planning is not to replace the current systems we have in place. Rather, we believe in the fact that we can bring a digital core which can empower your planning systems and to get more and more value out of the systems you have. So this means that we typically connect with your systems of record, such as ERP, MES, WMS systems, as well as with external data, such as climate data, and so on. Then second, Lights Out Planning valorizes this data and can help you to take better decisions, as well as steering your planning processes. For example, it can improve your supply planning by replacing static parameters you have within your supply planning systems by dynamic planning parameters, which are calculated in our smart parameter module. Okay, if we start a journey typically together with our customer, we start in fact first by creating the virtual twin. So now I will try to give you a glimpse of how this can look like. Unfortunately, today we don't have the time, I guess, to really give a demo of the Lights Out Planning tool. Hopefully we can show you more in a later session, but here already a small view of how this can look like. Okay, so here you see, in fact, when we start at the customer, first we start from the transactional data. So we get the transactional data, and then via crawling algorithms, we crawl through that data, and in fact, we auto-build the virtual twin, which is the representation of the network. Then, of course, we link it back together, back to your data sources, so it becomes in sync with what is happening in the network, and it can start giving more insights to our customers. Second, it gives end-to-end visibility. For example, it will give proactive alerts in case of unusual events. Okay, so after creating the virtual twin and connecting it back to your data, we typically go a step further with our customers, and we start calculating smart parameters. Okay, So here you can see in our smart parameter module, we can, based on both internal and external data and based on historicals, we calculate a demonstrated value for example, lead time parameters, capacity parameters, scrap parameters, and so on. We can also go one step further and instead of just showing a demonstrated parameter to our customers, we can start discovering what the influencing factors are, and we can create a forward-looking parameter. This parameter can help our customers to get to make better business decisions, but as well to steer current planning systems with dynamic parameters instead of static ones. Okay, when we go even one step further and we start connecting financial data to the virtual twin, we can make, instead of just a feasible plan for our customers, we can start creating a financially optimal plan for our customers, which means that the parameters, for example, are not only realistic anymore, but as well they are financially optimized or financially perfect. Okay, and then as a customer, you also have your personal room, let's say, where you can create the dashboards that are most important for you. As well, LightsOutPlanning can give you proactive alerts or proactive advice even on what requires your attention or how you can potentially improve your business. So these are the 5 main capabilities of our LightsOutPlanning platform. Now Koen will talk a bit further about one of the use cases we recently have done together with the customer on this platform.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. So indeed, I think up until now, what we've said is, okay, this is the vision of LightsOutPlanning. This is what we've been working for over the last 2 to 3 years together with some of our key customers. And these are the 5 core capabilities that we offer to them and how we help them to use those capabilities to get more value out of their current planning landscape and to create better planning decisions. Now, to make that a little bit more tangible, we're going to try to walk you through an end-to-end case with one of our main customers in the industrial food processing business.
So, Koen, we have a question, if you don't mind. Who's the typical buyer? Is it vice president of supply chain? Is it vice president of manufacturing? Is it a demand planner? Is it someone in IT? Who are you normally working with?
Yeah. So typically, indeed, you see that we're working with the supply chain business partner. That's our typical partner. The supply chain person up until now is always the person that initiates the initial contact and then tries to group, I would say, the platform broader into the company, trying to leverage more useful insights also in that one version of the truth with operations, with quality, with the commercial business partners, and finally also finance. But let's say up until now, it's typically the business partners. In terms of IT, up until now, IT is typically the, let's say, player, or he's part of the decision-making unit at the customer, obviously, but not truly initiating the contact. Yes, they look into advanced planning technology and the landscape and how that is evolving. But if you look at immediate business value realization and through business discussions, this is typically coming from the planning community.
And Valerie used some terms that one of our listeners are saying, you know, what do these mean? So she used terms like Kafka and Spark, and, you know, we're talking about open source technology here. Can you just talk a little bit, Koen, about the architecture, and is this a hosted environment, cloud-based, you know, and what some of these terms mean?
Yeah, sure. No, so our technology is indeed fully cloud-based, right? So it's fully cloud-based. We actually operate out of a Microsoft Azure platform, and we use indeed open source big data techniques and algorithmic techniques to create our platform. So actually there is 3 types of, I would say, technologies that are generating our lights out planning solution. The first one is the pure big data techniques. So big data techniques, there is one element which is storage. So there is things like blob storage, which are new storage techniques that are enabling us and our customers to combine different types of data in a non-structured way. So you can have ERP planning, but also point of sale, sensor data in one environment. And then secondly, there is also the whole technology around big data analysis. And those are going in terms of, I would say, maturity, R, Python, and then you go to Scala, Spark, which are more, I would say, the Mercedes of big data analysis. And those two combined, so the storage, the new storage technologies and the new analytics technologies, those are, let's say, the solutions, the open source solutions Lights Out Planning uses to work on big data. Then the second element is obviously the whole, I would say, way how to structure that into a transformable way. And now then we're coming into database schemes and traditional database schemes which are predefined, and then also new database schemes which are going to be defined on the moment that you actually interface with them, or you're trying to grasp value out of that. And then thirdly, there is the whole, I would say, user interface and the new way of helping planners to immediately get access to the information they need on the moment they need for the dimensions they need in terms of a certain time window or a certain product or a certain node. And those three combined offer the full solution. But they're all, as you indicate, Laura, all based on open source technology, which we combine on our platform and then offer to our customers.
So Koen, let's talk a little bit about that, because this is schema on read versus schema on write, correct?
In certain elements, yes.
And the nuance of that, most people who are in planning haven't thought about, right? So schema on write forced us to, lock in master data, lock in hierarchies, lock in relationships, and then we implemented. And then when the business changed, we couldn't change. But this kind of architecture allows flexibility. So, schemas can change, the master data relationships are more flexible. What are you experiencing with clients around agile technology and adaptive nature of the solution?
Well, our experience in that it's really, truly very new for a lot of people, not only in terms of the concept, right, but also in terms of seeing how to apply it. I think most of the technology partners that we work with have been educated in elements where you have fixed rows and column structures, and you have to predefine that, trying to already think about all use cases you can cover with that, and moving into an environment where you say, no, this is how the data, we can store the data in multiple ways. And in terms of how we want to access it, we're going to define on the moment itself how we want to look at it, is not only conceptually, but also technologically quite a change. Now, what does that practically mean? Practically means, for example, that if in today's technology, typically when you have a new product or a new supply chain node or a new whatever master data element, you need to pre-configure that before you can put transactional data against it, before you can start analyzing it. If you look at the way that we look at it, we suck in all the data, and actually what we do is we bring to the planner, hey, we found these and these new nodes, these and these new plants, these and these new products or customers, and please make a decision where you want to put them into the hierarchy. And based upon that, we can work further. And that concept is quite new and quite innovative, although it seems perhaps something small. It's quite technologically, it's quite challenging, but also in terms of looking in how to behave, it's quite different.
And at business value level, I think it's quite enlightening to be able to have flexible planning systems, because, most planners say that, they've got to make the systems work for them versus having adaptive systems. Well, let's let you go through the use cases, and then I'll continue to monitor the questions. I look forward to getting the questions as they come in. Thank you.
Yep, sure. So the case which we'd like to bring to talk a little bit more practically on how a journey towards lights out planning can be is with one of the customers that we actually started with 2-3 years ago, and it's a company called Cheerios, which in Europe is a quite large industrial food processor and a competitor of the likes of Cargill. The case will move you through some of the stages that typically we see in, let's say, maturing towards a lights out planning alike solution or implementing a solution and driving business value from that. Because typically, if you look at the 5 capabilities that Valerie was referring to, none of our customers start with all 5 at once. Even within one of those capabilities, we always start with a sub-scope to see if there is business value and scale if it brings value, but also dare to fail fast when it doesn't. So Cheerios, to give you some background on the company, it's an industrial food processor that actually takes corn and wheat crops from the land and processes that in different kind of applications that it sells B2B, but typically as a sugar replacing component. So if you look at the business context, this is a very industrialized network. So actually there is 3 big steps. You have the crops coming from the land, so the corn, the wheat, or the sugar beets. You put it in the mill. The mill actually extracts out of those primary products the most valuable asset, which is a starchy, slurry-alike product that holds a lot of nutrition value. And then, as a big second step, you start processing that in all kind of different applications. And in the third step, you then have that application packaged in a certain format, either a big bag or a small bag or a certain product, and you ship it to B2B customers like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, that put these kind of sugar replacement products in their beverages, or in the industrial bakery business, but also even in the pharmaceutical business where it's being used in certain pharmaceutical applications. Now, next to the heavily industrialized network, this company is also facing a very strong market variability and an increasing market variability. Reason being that over the last 10 years, this was a very heavily regulated market. There were quotas on terms of how much sugar replacement products could be put into the market, and that market share was then, I would say, distributed over a couple of a certain number of players in the market. But this quota now has been put off. It's now a deregulated market, and all these companies are now preparing in how to put their network in the most optimal way, ready for that new deregulated market where there is no more quota on the volume they can bring into the market, but obviously margins are then coming under pressure in knowing when is it now profitable to produce and profitable to sell. So it was, I would say, quite a changing environment where before they were very functionally oriented. You had supply chain working and making sure that a certain plan was brought from the markets into the heavily industrialized sites. Sales trying to push those volumes into the market, operations trying to get OEE as high as possible and get the mills running. You have finance trying to look into fixed and variable cost and energy, and a raw material team that is trying to hedge against the fluctuating market prices of corn and wheat. So very functionally oriented company. And in terms of lights out planning, what we did is we tried to look at what can we now bring as value in terms of from the data, knowing that we took 2 years of historical data, but we did not look at the typical data only from ERP and planning systems, but we also looked at sensor data for the most important sites and OCPI, and we used our lights out planning technology to see what kind of business value we can drive in terms of digitalization. And the first thing we did is actually connect and integrate the network. So the company before was very, I would say, silo oriented and also data silo oriented. A typical business question, if you look at their, I would say, planning process, was not only about what is the joint plan we will make together, but is what input are we even going to put in the plan? Because planning doesn't believe the data of operations, and operations doesn't believe the data of finance, and finance doesn't believe the data of commercial. So the first thing that we did actually is we worked together with the company to move towards the concept of company data. And we took the different data sources together to connect that network together and integrate the network and create, if you want, a virtual twin, or the first version of a virtual twin of their end-to-end network. This held the commercial information, it held the supply chain information, it held the operations information, so the bombs, the routings, it held the raw material information, also looking into raw material pricing, it held the financial data in terms of fixed and variable cost per product and per work center, it held the energy data, because energy was a very important driver in this heavily industrialized process. So it held all this data in the same environment and connected this data into a digital version of how their end-to-end business worked. And this enabled for them the first time end-to-end thinking. So what we did is we moved, based on our virtual twin, we moved them towards a process which is actually integrated business planning. Integrated business planning, where the different functional departments were making a joint plan, not only a volume-based plan, which they also had, they had a master plan in APO, but a financially optimized plan, which was actually also driven by activity-based costing, so fixed and variable costing, raw material hedged prices, and latest commercial trends, to truly have a monthly integrated business planning process where a joint financial optimal plan was made together and then also redistributed to each of the functions to execute that, to commercial to sell it, to supply chain to plan it and to put it into APO, to raw material to buy it, and to operations to ensure the capacity for it. So that's the first element we did, where we saw that the current planning environment they had, which was APO, was not truly able to look into storing one version of the truth of data across the different functions, connecting that together in a virtual version of how the true end-to-end network was tied together, and enabling them to make better business decisions in integrated business planning and having the EBITDA optimal forward-looking 36 months out plan. And for them, that was a first huge step, because it didn't only break the data silos between the functions, but also it created a first connected enterprise thinking where the different functions were looking to one version of the truth and making a joint plan, which was unfortunately not really the case in their previous APO supported environment. The second thing we did then is actually we said, okay, look, there is business value coming from company data. What else can we do now with this data that we gathered? So the second thing we did is we started to link other sources of data to that virtual twin and discovered the influencing factors on the EBITDA optimized plan. So we did not only look at planning data and operations and transactional data, but we actually discovered that the most important element in the EBITDA optimization algorithms was one of the sites here in Belgium actually, where and actually one of the lines, it was appeared to be a bottleneck line. It was a crystallization line that was making some of the milled products into one of the most important applications. And when we looked into the most important EBITDA factor of that integrated business planning environment, we saw it was the capacity of that line. And we went even one step further. We coupled the digital twin of that line with the sensor data. So we looked into 500 sensors and we looked at what are now the influencing factors of this capacity of this line that is very important for the overall EBITDA driven integrated business plan. And what came out actually is that, and that was quite a surprise for everyone, is that the cool water tank, the temperature of the cool water tank of an outside tank, outside the factory, which was typically not really looked at by, surely not supply chain, truly by some engineers, was one of the most important influencing factors for that capacity, because it's a crystallization line, right? So by definition, it is trying to make crystals. And the cool water temperature of the feeding line was very much correlated with the yield percentage and therefore capacity of that line. And this was something that was known if you would walk around, I would say, the darker spaces of the factory and you would talk to some of the most experienced engineers. This was something that was known, but it was not never reflected in the plan, neither was it linked towards the true integrated EBITDA impact. So what we did is we found this out, and then what we also did together with them is we started to look forward. How, if this capacity is so important and if it is driven by the temperature of the outside cool tank, how can we now try to forecast this parameter and make it a smart parameter in our integrated business plan? And together we decided to start looking outside. Because what is the influencing factor of the cool tank temperature outside? It is actually the weather. So we decided to buy external data which you actually could buy for $1 a day, and you had a 24-month outlook of what the temperature was going to do, with obviously varying degrees of reliability the further you go in time. But what we did is actually we coupled that outside temperature data to start to forecast the capacity of that line in the coming period, so that we could match it to the integrated business plan. How much EBITDA are we going to plan to realize together? How much is coming from that side? And how is that then matching towards the weather forecast? Because if the weather forecast is not in line, we have to either pre-cool the tank so that we constantly operate at the optimum, or preheat the tank. So again, it is constantly operating at the optimum. And this now was something which was shared in one version of the truth between engineering, operations, supply chain, and then even broader finance and commercial trying to sell it. So this was a true case where we started from putting a digital twin across the different functional areas in place for the company, to looking into where other internal data sources like sensor data are able to discover new insights into what are the influencing factors of our EBITDA plan. And thirdly, how can we use external data to forecast these most influencing parameters in an optimal way in order to make sure that we are always constantly as a team operating at the optimum. And actually it was a nice journey. It was a nice journey where actually process-wise we did 3 steps, and we didn't all do them at the same time, but we evolved in our maturity, where the first most important element for the company was, okay, what is my current network? What are the drivers in my current network? And how can I use company data to improve my end-to-end financials? But secondly, how can I use that same company data, but more expanded towards other types of data, to trigger improvements, in this case, asset throughput? And thirdly, how can I leverage new types of data, such as external data, to forecast what I need to do, make better planning decisions, and continuously perform at the optimum? And some of the business result value that the company was able to realize was that operational performance increased due to better data accuracy, but also the use of assets. So the capacity of that line, for example, it went from 262 tons, it's tons of dry substance, by the way, per day, towards 282 tons of dry substance per day, and a yield accuracy of 49.9 to 50.2. A yield accuracy of 0.3% increase might seem little, but it's a huge difference in a heavily industrialized network.
So Koen, we have a question, if you don't mind. Question is about dirty data. I mean, everybody has it, and this looks like it, was multiple data types. And how do you deal with dirty data? And how did you work with current systems? Was that an obstacle, or how did you get around it?
Yeah, no, that surely was an obstacle. So in moving towards one version of the truth, there was also a foundation work to be done by the different disciplines to make sure that that part of the data was cleaned. And in some areas that was easier to do than in others. And I can give you 2 examples. The first one is the financial data. In the financial data, that was, to be honest, in the beginning, quite a difficult journey. Because if you want to go to true EBITDA optimization in such an environment, you have to have that financial data at the relatively granular level. So we spent quite some time with actually the finance teams to make sure that their data was, let's say, reconcilable with some of the data which was more coming from supply chain operations. So that was quite a journey, to be honest. A second element was where it was not about the level of granularity and some, I would say, more business interpretation, but where it was just the source of information was not there. Very practically, when we looked into the 500 sensors, we also realized in the data quite quickly that some of the sensors were just not working anymore because the data was way off. So new technologies are helping you to discover those patterns and to see where they cannot tie the things together. But it's always then still necessary to, together with the business, make assumptions and create some additional logic how to tie it together. Because unfortunately, it still is garbage in, garbage out. So either you clean it at the source, or you try to create some intermediate translations to ensure a sufficient level of quality moving forward.
But Schema on Read helps us some with that. So Koen, it looks like we're going to have to wrap up here. Are there any last words of wisdom for the group?
Well, perhaps two things there in order to wrap up. The first one is most companies that we see, and it's mentioned here, we see are spending quite some time in, I would say, activities that do not always reflect the best value for planners. It's mostly around keeping the lights on. So we advise our companies, our customers, to try to not be such a kind of company, to try to be a digital winner. But that being said, it's the journey towards that new way of planning is quite huge. And it's not possible, or we believe it's not possible, to take all these challenges on at the same time. So try to start with identifying those elements where you have white spaces in your current planning capabilities. Start small with building them, but do it in such a way that if it is positive, you can scale it fast to the rest of your business.
Thank